The US has been declaring the Americas off limits to outside powers for 200 years, but it seems like every time it does, those outside powers seem to gain ground. In 1823, for example, the President Monroe told Europe, stay out of the Americas. And by 1904, Roosevelt had updated it, and the US had the right to intervene anywhere in the hemisphere it judged unstable. And as we know, what's followed was decades of occupations and installed governments across Latin America. Each one of those left behind a country that would eventually look for outside powers to balance against Washington. Cuba is the clearest case of this, I think. In this situation, the US backed Batista, and Washington refused to recognize the new government and tried to overthrow it. Castro then turned to the Soviets for protection. So this intervention that was designed to keep foreign rivals out ended up producing a Soviet base in Cuba, off the coast of Florida. This unilateral US action doesn't really eliminate foreign influence, it actually creates the political conditions for it. Let's go to January 2026, when the US forces extracted Venezuela's president from his palace. Trump called it the Don Roe Doctrine, and the goal of this was written into the national security strategy: deny China influence in the hemisphere. China had already invested around $67 billion in Venezuelan oil, and so the governments across Latin America really condemned that operation and started looking at their own options. China's spent like 2 decades now offering Latin America something that Washington doesn't. And it looks like the more aggressively that the US invokes this doctrine, the better the Chinese offer looks. So the US is using this 200-year-old tool to push China out of Latin America. But when it does, China kind of gets a better argument for being there. What do you think of the hypothesis? Let me know your thoughts.